Good morning. This is your weather briefing for Tuesday, May 14th. Your briefers are Debbie Sham and Dan Halperin. Looking at the infrared satellite this morning, we find two areas of low pressure, one over New England, one just to the south of Greenland. Both of these features will be in play over the next few days. As we zoom in and look at a visible satellite image across New England, we find that the higher clouds, which are the blue tinted clouds here, moving north into northern Maine, but there are plenty of low-level clouds that are still lingering across the entire region and will be a factor throughout the day today. Our current surface analysis shows those two areas of low pressure. There is actually another area of low pressure offshore New England that is connected to the low pressure center over New York by a surface trough. These features will exist and move slightly to the northeast over the day on Wednesday, and then that larger low pressure center to the south of Greenland will also persist on Wednesday. Those features move off to the east slowly on Thursday, and the low pressure over Greenland will begin to weaken as we get into the day on Thursday, but our system off the Canadian Maritimes does intensify into a gale or nor'easter type system over the next few days, and is something that will be a factor over the next 48 hours. As we look at the sea ice and iceberg analysis, we see that there are some icebergs located between the solid magenta and the dashed magenta line, mostly well to the south of our route of flight. There are some icebergs, though, on the just after departure from Goose Bay on the way to Greenland, and then some sea ice between the coast and the dashed magenta line near shore. The sea surface temperatures, where there is open water, generally just a few degrees above freezing along the route of flight. Our current sea state analysis shows that due to the strong winds associated with that low pressure center, some of the peak wave heights are on the order of 30 to 35 feet. Along the flight route, the peak wave heights are generally on the order of 20 feet. And as we move forward 48 hours, we see that as that low begins to gradually weaken, the waves should also weaken as well. On the route of flight here, the waves generally on the order of about 6 feet or less. Our freezing level analysis shows freezing levels near 5,000 feet across Oxford this morning, between the surface and 5,000 feet between Oxford and Presque Isle, and then some temperatures aloft that are a bit warmer as we go toward Goose Bay, the freezing level at Goose Bay near 5,000 feet this morning as well. As we go forward in time today, we see that the freezing levels actually increase around Goose Bay to values greater than 5,000 feet. Multiple freezing levels across Greenland, with the freezing level down to the surface near the southern coast of Greenland. Overnight on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, we find this pattern continuing with some warmer conditions near Goose Bay, but an area of freezing levels between the surface and 5,000 feet between Oxford and Goose Bay, and then the freezing levels near the surface down around Greenland. So on the approach to Greenland, icing conditions could be a problem all the way down toward the surface. Our temperatures at 5,000 feet, generally in the 20s and 30s, with the coldest air generally across New England in the short term. There may even be a balmy 40-degree reading as you approach Goose Bay throughout the period, but generally 20s and 30s here. At 10,000 feet, considerably colder, temperatures generally running in the teens, maybe an isolated temperature at or above 20 degrees. Our icing potential, we have icing potential that exists at 5,000 feet. Our main concern here throughout the day today is that area between, that segment between Oxford and Presque Isle, where we have freezing levels that are below 5,000 feet, and also areas with relative humidities greater than 70%, as indicated by the green shading. If you stay below about 4,000 feet, you should stay above freezing, but you could still run into some IFR conditions or some scattered precipitation. If you can get out of Presque Isle and head toward Goose Bay, conditions improve considerably. The freezing levels increase, and the air is drier, so icing not as much of a concern on that segment. From Goose Bay to Greenland, however, we find that there is the threat of icing with the higher moisture values on the approach into Greenland, and again, we're finding multiple freezing layers, so lower level icing certainly a concern as we approach Greenland. As we go through the overnight hours, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, we find that this pattern continues throughout the day Wednesday, with some threat of icing expanding northward toward Goose Bay, but not including Goose Bay as we get to 0Z on Thursday, and then the icing threat persists across southern Greenland throughout the period, and that will continue in the overnight Wednesday into Thursday morning hours. At 10,000 feet, a similar story for New England. So again, the threat of icing conditions from Oxford to Presque Isle, conditions improving once you get north of Presque Isle toward Goose Bay. So that's the same story throughout the day today. And then southern Greenland, of course, the threat of icing exists at 10,000 feet there as well. Overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, again, the icing threat begins to move north toward the Goose Bay area during the day on Wednesday, and then overnight Wednesday into Thursday morning as well. So icing is certainly a possibility across most of the segments from Oxford all the way on up toward Greenland at 10,000 feet. Our current flight categories indicating some MVFR and IFR conditions across New England this morning. That will persist throughout the day. So at our 6-hour forecast, we see quite a bit of low IFR and some low IFR conditions across New England. And again, that lasts into forecast hour 12, 18, and 24. Goose Bay looks fairly good, and some possible MVFR, IFR conditions moving in towards southern Greenland later in the period. Our turbulence analysis shows that there is the forecast for some turbulence, mostly offshore New England, associated with that developing gale and nor'easter system. And then we find turbulence also possible across southern Greenland associated with these stronger wind speeds with that low pressure center up in Greenland. Finally, we looked at the volcanic ash, and none is forecast over the next 24 hours. As we move into some of our stations here, Presque Isle, the wind speeds initially favoring runway 10 throughout the day today. As we go into the overnight hours tonight, the winds shift and begin to favor runway 01 as we get into Wednesday morning into midday on Wednesday. And then the winds will continue to shift such that they will begin to favor runway 28 as we get into Thursday morning. Winds will favor runway 26 at Goose Bay throughout most of the day today. The winds will become light around 23Z today and continue fairly light overnight, beginning to favor runway 16 as we get into Wednesday morning, and then again continuing to shift such that they are more onshore and favoring runway 08 as we get into midday on Wednesday, and that should persist as we go overnight on Wednesday into Thursday morning. In Greenland, the surface winds will be strongly influenced by both the terrain and a surface trough near the western coast of Greenland. We start out on Tuesday with a very strong left crosswind as you're approaching Greenland. We get some of a tailwind component as you begin to enter the fjord. Winds predominantly will be favoring runway 24, but due to the terrain and the placement of the surface trough, intermittently or temporarily the winds could actually favor runway 06. By Wednesday afternoon, winds should be primarily again favoring runway 24, and this should be the case as we head into the overnight hours on Wednesday and then also into Thursday morning, with the winds fairly light in the overnight hours. Our winds aloft at 5,000 feet. With a low pressure center off the coast of New England, we can expect a right crosswind as we go from Oxford into Presque Isle, with the winds fairly strong approaching Presque Isle later on today, the white arrows indicating 60-knot winds. As we move north of Presque Isle, again a right crosswind until we get into southern Canada, and then the winds begin to decrease and then become gradually a left crosswind as we get toward Goose Bay, and then fairly strong left crosswinds from Goose Bay into Greenland. Overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning, as the low pressure near New England begins to move to the north a bit, so do the strongest right crosswinds, but the pattern in general remains pretty much the same into Wednesday morning. And as we go throughout the day on Wednesday, the winds between Goose Bay and Greenland will decrease as that low pressure center begins to move off toward the east. And then overnight Wednesday, we begin to see right crosswinds increasing near the vicinity of Goose Bay into Thursday morning. At 10,000 feet, a similar pattern. The winds are a bit weaker between Oxford and Presque Isle, and then also between Presque Isle and Goose Bay throughout the day today into 0Z Wednesday. The left crosswinds between Goose Bay and Greenland are significantly stronger at 10,000 feet compared to at 5,000 feet. And then as we go into the overnight hours and then into Wednesday morning, we see that the strong left crosswinds continue between Goose Bay and Greenland, but they will begin to weaken as we go throughout the day on Wednesday, again as that low pushes off to the east. And that trend will continue along that segment through Thursday morning, but by that point you'll have a fairly strong right crosswind at Goose Bay. Your drop winds over Oxford today, fairly light winds at 3,000 feet, winds generally out of the west-northwest at 6,000 and 9,000 feet, and out of the west-southwest at 12,000 feet. Looking at our TAFs, we find that we'll have ceilings of about 3,000 feet throughout much of the day today near Oxford. Ceilings will be lowering to about 2,500 feet by 0 Zulu, with some rain showers in the area potentially as well. Again, if you can fly, if you were flying today, if you could fly below about 4,000 feet, you'd be at temperatures above freezing, although you'd still have to deal with some IFR and some precipitation. As we head toward Presque Isle, the key would be to get in and out of Presque Isle before 0Z tonight. Notice that the ceilings decrease down to 2,500 feet by 0Z, and we also see the chance of snow mixing in with the rain starting at 0Z. So the earlier you can get in and out of Presque Isle, the better for the day today. We'll be available if you have any questions for us. Otherwise, safe travels.